Thank you so much for joining me for these instructional videos about the TMEA 2020 bass trombone etudes. We got one more to go. This is the third etude, and it's the D minor by Blazevich, number 11 on page 10 of the tuba book. And we've incorporated it for bass trombone just to practice all the great music of Blazevich down an octave, basically. Originally written for tenor trombone with tenor and alto clef, and then transcribed down an octave for tuba, and bass trombone gets to borrow that, and it's still really great. This etude is a lot of fun, also very difficult for a number of reasons, and it's going to require some special practice, I think, because it's like nothing else that you get to see on bass trombone in the regular course of being in high school and even later into your musical career. So you can spend some time before you start. I always recommend numbering the measures, write in all of the breath marks, even the most obvious and conventional ones, and write in all of your valve choices and alternate positions. And again, there are a lot of them when playing bass trombone. You get to choose for F between 6th, trigger 1, and 2nd trigger, flat 2 alone. All three of those are going to be viable at different spots, so I like to write them in just so that I know and can always rely upon that. And then you can erase them and change them if you find something you like a lot better. So don't hesitate to try and go through that process. Make sure they all sound the same. All of those different Fs need to have the same quality of tone. And so sometimes you choose the valve based on which one sounds better, which one you can play with your better kind of tone production, which one fits the slide better with the valve. Sometimes it's better to leave the valve down instead of changing, even if it's easier in some cases to play one valve or another. So anyway, there's a lot of different options. Go through and figure them out. It's one of the most unique and interesting challenges of playing bass trombone, in my opinion. So there's a light staccato 8th note pattern going on here at the beginning, and you want to play this throughout the horn at the different dynamics, forte, especially piano, just to get used to the feel. Staccato doesn't necessarily mean the notes are short. It just means that they have space. So I'm going to start on a D in the staff. And you can kind of make up patterns as well. That's just the rhythm of the first bar and a half. And it happens a lot. And so it makes sense that if you practice it in a lot of different ways, scales, arpeggios, single pitch, intervals, whatever comes to mind, that's going to get better if you go down through the entire horn. Now, 2 to 4 notes at a time. Sometimes I'll say 2 to 4 bars at a time, usually, sometimes 4 to 8. In this case, at the very beginning, you need to practice a few notes at a time to get used to how everything sounds and to get the right tone and articulation. So I'm just going to do the first 3 notes over and over. And you can go anywhere in the piece and work it out that way to make sure you hear it. Sometimes you should do it without the tongue. Again, you're just trying to feel out what the embouchure needs to do, what the air needs to do before you kind of go back in, add the tongue. It helps to connect the notes. Even though here they're not always connected, there's still some space and everything. You still want to feel the air moving through all these different intervals and scales and accidentals. Now, using a tuner is going to really help because these intervals are weird. Like I said, you've got the first 2 intervals, you have an octave, and then you have a tritone, or a diminished fifth, in this case, from the D to the G sharp. That's an unusual interval. The G sharp is there sort of to prepare you for A, because the G sharp leads up to an A natural. So your ears have to be able to hear that. And I'm just looking at this piece, there's accidentals so all over the place. And you need to hear what you're about to play. And that just comes with very slow practice, understanding kind of how the notes work together, not getting too flustered by the sea of sharps and naturals that show up in the middle of the piece, and even double sharps a lot of the time. You just have to get accustomed to it, and it takes slow practice. If you look at measure 14, that's the L'Estesso tempo that is in 2/4. These are all kind of diminished arpeggios and then sort of major arpeggios with the leading tone involved, going back and forth. And so I would take one of those bars and work on it over and over, then combine the two of them together and work on it over and over, then go to the next sequence, and that sequence is up and up as well. Then you start adding, like I'm saying, 2 groups or 3 groups or 4 groups of these measures together to make larger phrases, or groups of notes to make a full bar. And be patient with yourself. It's kind of late in the process now. We're almost to the audition. It's still never too late to go slow and do this to your music, with your music, because it's going to help your ears. It's going to help you feel more confident about centering each of the pitches. You're just going to have a lot better of a grasp over it, and it can take you maybe from knowing it at a 90% level to knowing it at a 93% level, which might be the difference between alternate and actually getting the invitation. So do this kind of work. You will be satisfied. You want to match the sound in the valves, whether it's the different valves or the valve to the open horn, whatever it is. My A doesn't quite match the sound of the D. I kind of like the D sound better. A is a little stuffy, so I'll kind of work on kind of blowing that out, opening it up as I practice, sometimes going in and out of the valve. You can hear there's some inconsistencies, and you just need to spend time ironing that out with lip slurs through the valves, scales through the valves, and then this is going to have, again, a much better chance of being consistent. Let's see. Don't let the air stop while you're playing. You want to have this long tone feel throughout the piece. Even though these notes are being separated, it still feels like I'm playing one long tone. And if I had to choose, like, to be incorrect in one side or the other, I'd rather play my notes a little bit too long than play them too short, have the air get stuck behind the tongue, and kind of lose the musical momentum. So err on the side of long notes. And that's kind of how I approach trombone playing in general, but certainly that makes a lot of sense in this etude. From a musical perspective, this etude has a lot going for it because of the amount of chromaticism and the interesting harmonic journey it takes you on, the sequencing of the harmonies, and then the minor key, which lends itself toward a lot of accidentals. Tension is constantly building and then being released. And this is even more obvious here as things move forward. Chromatic pitches build tension, accidentals build tension, sequences build tension, and they're all over the place in this etude. So it's a lot of fun to look for that direction. If you just kind of play plodding eighth notes over and over and over again, even if they sound great, it'll sound like you can play the bass trombone really well, but not so much that you're a good musician. So you have to be a good musician who plays the bass trombone well. That's what I would rather be. I'd rather be known as a good musician that can play bass trombone than a great bass trombone player that has trouble playing music. And eventually the bass trombone technique will come along. But you still got to do all that work in order for the music to come out, or people will just be distracted by mistakes and inconsistencies and things like that. So there's going to be more dynamic contrast than what's written. I'm looking at the first line, and I don't see a whole lot except for piano until the 5th line, where it says forte, and a molto crescendo before that. There's some room to grow in mezzo forte. There's some room to grow and then come back. Grow and then come back. Measure 5 and 6, each of those grows, then comes back on the end of 2, or end of 1, and then grows again. And music always leads to 1. In this case, you're going to hear a lot of and 3 and 1 and 2 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 and 3 and 1. Now, if you just played that all piano, it would be pretty boring. So you have to take the time, find the phrases, go through the bars to beat 1, and then you can see whether you want to do that in the loud dynamic, forte, mezzo forte, the piano dynamic, but there's always direction regardless of the dynamic you're going. That's what keeps it interesting. from just an overall big picture of this piece, to me it kind of sounds like there's something sinister and foreboding pervading all the way through, and it can't be stopped. It's going to get here, and I just have to deal with it when it gets here. So you can't run from it. You can't hide from it. It is relentless in its pursuit, and you want to communicate that in the etude. It's far off at first, kind of piano. It's soft, but it's coming, and we know it's coming. And then that kind of helps give you a concept of how you want to grow and move through the piece. There really isn't any tempo fluctuations. Maybe occasionally you pull back here and there, but it's very, very little. Mostly it's just an intense, inevitable movement through to the final part of the piece, where the sinister and foreboding presence is now there, and you have to decide how you want to handle it. But that's the end of the piece, so the rest is up to the imagination. Yes, I promise you'll enjoy this one. Take the time with the tuner, get to hear it. I recommend conducting and listening to the recording example that I provided, and to get some ideas that way. And listen to everybody's recordings. They're all very, very good. A lot of professionals have put these out there. So thank you again for joining me for all of these, and I hope that it's helpful to your preparation and that you do great in the next audition. Good luck to you.